Ready?
Let's do this.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is exciting. I haven't seen most of you in a year or more. My name is Paula Del Rio, and I welcome you on behalf of Georgia Women and those who stand with us, steering committee. Um, we have a fantastic panel today. We have DeMarcus Bacon from Georgia Equality, and he's going to talk to us about your advocacy tools. We have Alison Glass from 9 to 5, and she's going to talk to us about policy push for women and children. And Hannah Perkins from AFL-CIO. Your vote, your voice. We are going to have Q&A after each speaker. If you have any question anytime, please feel free to add it to the chat, and we will have the questions after each speaker talk to us. Will be about 20 minutes per person. And our first speaker is DeMarcus Bacon. And DeMarcus Bacon is a native of Georgia and lives in Macon. He is also full-time social advocacy to advance fairness, safety, and opportunity for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities and our allies throughout the state as the Southern Field Organizer for Georgia Equality. DeMarcus does this through conducting voter registration and educational activities, provide information to decision makers, and work to organize and mobilize LGBT residents and allies to advance equality in urban, suburban, and rural communities across the state. Welcome, DeMarcus.
Hey there, ladies. How are we all doing tonight? You're doing well?
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Doing great.
I know it's at the end of the day and we're winding down in our homes tonight, but we're going to try and make this as fun as and interactive as possible with everything going on. So I'm going to start, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. Let's see. You think you'll get used to all of this by now. I'll be a pro. Okay, here. There we go. Can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Georgia Equality, what can I say? We are one of the state's largest LGBT organization. We do our very best at making sure that people who are part of the LGBT community are championed around our state and make sure that we have equitable protections for ourselves out here in Georgia. And these are just a few things that we work on and how we do those things. We have an outstanding community outreach and education program where we do trans leadership classes as well as youth HIV policy advocacy. We're actually doing calls right now for individuals who would love to be advocates. So if you know anyone who would love to work in infectious diseases or whatnot and want to understand policy a little bit more, this is a great way to do that. We do that by, we also do a lot of education around voter registration. We've done it together. And also advocate for safety school programs. On the legislative advocacy side, we do a lot of endorsing candidates. We do a lot of making sure our representatives are educated, and we do that by what we're going to be talking about tonight is lobbying. We also collect stories and we introduce and we support legislation. And we also stop very harmful legislation. In the past 7 years, Georgia Equality has done, with the help of our supporters, have done an immaculate job at making sure that hateful LGBT legislation has not been passed. And we've done that for the past 7 years. So that's really great. And we do applaud our advocates and our supporters out there. Okay, and tonight I want to make sure that you know how to become the best community advocate. I mean, I think y'all have been doing for, I think last 4 or 5 years, y'all have been established. Y'all have done a pretty bang up job. And I don't know how you all do it, but you
Lost you.
Yeah, DeMarcus, we've lost your sound.
and we're going to talk a little bit maybe about how we can use social media, even though sometimes we feel like social media is somewhat of a hell right now. But we're going to see the best ways to navigate through that. Okay. We, as Georgia Equality, we want to make sure that everybody is at least up aware about what lobbying is going to look like this year. Obviously, COVID is going on. So Georgia Equality, we will not be lobbying at the Golden Dome this year. But let's get into some points.
I lost sound. Does anyone else have sound?
No, I don't again.
DeMarcus, we can't hear you.
Oh my goodness, you can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
No.
There you are. You're back.
Oh my God. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So what part did I leave off on?
Good question. The last thing you said was that there was not going to be any lobbying at the Gold Dome.
There will be no lobbying, obviously, this year at the Gold Dome due to COVID-19 restrictions. And because of these risks, even though we're having the vaccine has rolled out, the risks are still heightened to this upcoming summer. There also will be no legislative page program. These are, many of you have been up to the Golden Dome and you've seen these little middle schoolers that come out, you sign a piece of paper, they go in, they bring out the representative. That program will not exist this year for the health and sake of those young Buccaneers there. Obviously, we feel that your health and your safety is number one for our community, the LGBT community. Many of us are suffering from those who are positive, who are part of the HIV positive community. Their immune systems are compromised during this time. So we're taking that also on the nose. Again, Georgia Equality will not be.
Okay, we lost you again.
Of course, you have all done a bang up job of doing this. Your elected and appointed officials, they make different decisions when they know they're being watched by their constituents. So you showing up, you calling them, your emails, they look at these things and they're paying, they know that they're being paid attention to, so they're likely more to make the right decision or get a more enlightened decision from their communities that they're representing. Also, another big thing is getting the right information to the right person at the right time. If I am coming into their office with a pamphlet on all the information they need to know, we become a point person for our representatives to make sure that they're making a more enlightened decisions. They have the numbers, they have the facts, and they also have personal stories that they can use when they go into these community meetings. So please share your story. They're very important. They're best to use for our representatives as their arsenals, their tools when they go in to defend pieces of legislation. Okay, obviously this year is going to be a little bit more different, but we still have to stick to some of the traditional tactics we have so long used. They're still effective now. They're still very effective. And those are things like making phone calls. Obviously, just in the last 5 months, I'm sure everyone has gotten a bajillion phone calls from the campaigns or other nonprofits about getting out to vote. Even though it was nerve-wracking, it got the point across. So that's one of the tactics that we use for one, contacting our representatives or contacting our supporters so they can contact their representatives. There's more opportunities for that later on. Okay, got in that. Also, deep canvassing. I went into this a little bit, but that's a proper protocol word for glossary word for deep canvassing. When you're calling your supporters or emailing your supporters, whatnot, and you're asking them to contact their representatives or their senators to make sure that they pass proper legislation or they vote down negative pieces of legislation. Also, going to their, calling their office staff. Hannah is on the call tonight, and I commend her on her work of working in some of the House Representatives' offices in her time and her tenure there. Building a great relationship with their staff is very important. Knowing their names, if you continuously call them, I'm sure they will remember your name if that does happen. And also, Hannah, if you're, oh, bless you, please. Hannah, if you have anything that you want to add to this is a kind of a section where I know that you have a great deal of experience, and please drop in if you have anything to say. Snail mail. I think we're all understanding the importance of snail mail. Like I said, we've all gotten these campaign posters and flyers in our mailbox lately. So I guess it truly gets that point across. Just like that, we will, I know Georgia Quality will continue sending mailers and emails to our supporters just to get them updates on things, but also having an organization that is actively mailing in pieces of postcards and photos to your representatives to get your point across, to get what you truly, the issues that you truly are championing, making sure that they're getting a full story. Oftentimes when we're doing a postcard thing, a postcard campaign, and you have also done, you get together a few friends, obviously not big crowds now, but you have a postcard signing party, and those are very effective. They have personable notes to individuals, so you're actually getting another person. That's very valuable. I think that's something that we've seen in the past year or so with these campaigns. Also, op-eds and letters to your editor. I know a few of my good friends of Washington, D.C., who are working for some of the district offices out of here. They read a lot of the newspapers like the Macon Telegraph or the Gazette or the papers down in Savannah, due to the fact that they want to be aware of the most updated things, the things that our community cares about. So I know what we've been working on with Georgia Quality, we've been asking a lot of local individuals, a lot of local advocates to share their story through op-eds and letters to the editors. So that's a really great way and great tactic. So if you, the Georgia women, want to put something in a Telegraph, that's very important, address an opinion. I think those are very important. I think those are very influential. We've seen those work very well recently with a lot of the comprehensive civil rights legislation that we've done here in Macon and also in Savannah and Statesboro and Columbus. So those are very impactful. Okay, lobbying your legislator. Obviously, don't do anything fancy. Keep it simple. These are things that you can do. When you're writing a letter and an email to your representative, please do not write them a novel. They get hundreds of thousands of pieces of papers a day. um, or emails a day. And I'm sure them getting a dissertation on water levels or, very important issues. I do say they're very important issues, but I'm sure getting straight to the point is very important. So make sure when you're having you're writing a letter or email to your representative, make sure you keep it within a page, 2 paragraphs at most. When you're calling your elected official, we've seen the best practice of not holding them too long on the phone. Usually after that minute mark, they excuse me,
They go to sleep.
they go to sleep. Exactly, they go to sleep. So keeping keeping your statements or your questions on the answer machine, or even talking to the elected official or one of their assistants, is very important to keep your remarks very brief. Okay, provide.
Whoops.
Lost your sound again, DeMarcus.
Public testimonies, and these are very important. You ladies have been up to the Capitol building and you've heard things about committees and subcommittees. These are where the real true work happens. This is where the lobbyists come in, the advocates come in, and they get a chance to talk to their representative, as well as people who are appointed officials. This is a time to talk to them directly. This year, I know in some of the House committees, there have been some Zoom public hearings. I'm sure you have to be on a list to offer public statements. Usually, the best, I know we often seek, Georgia Quality seeks out good stories, and we ask individuals would they like to share their story in a public testimony. We do our very best to help and walk people through that process if they need any help with that. But when you're doing a public testimony, the best thing is to keep your remarks in a 2-page maximum. Very important. Now, even though there are some restrictions, some offices are allowing certain lobbyists or certain constituents in for face-to-face meetings or even Zoom meetings. That's the other option. Usually those meetings with your elected officials are 5 to 10 minutes. So when you're making your remarks, the best thing to do is the meat of the situation or topic while you're there. Make sure you get it in that 5-minute period right there. And then the rest can be telling your story. It can be bringing up those facts and stats that you have. Okay. 5 key elements to effective communication when you're talking to your representative. I would be very honest. When my first time going up to the Capitol building and seeing representatives, I was very starstruck.
We lost your sound again.
John Lewis as superheroes. So,
Hey, DeMarcus, we lost your sound for a minute there, and I want to hear what you had to say about John Lewis.
Oh my gosh, with John Lewis, like I said, some kids look at like G.I. Joe or Barbies as their superheroes or whatnot. I saw like John Lewis and many other representatives as my superheroes, as something something feasible that I can see growing up and inspiring to be. First, introducing yourself to them is very important when you first, obviously. Usually, I like to do a little recon on my representatives. I like to know who they are, what they like to do.
DeMarcus.
We lost you again, DeMarcus.
Shared a short conversation or something. Or I'll ask him, he's a big football fan. I'll, bring that up, whatnot. But you also remember that you have a bit of time, but build a sensible connection with them. Introduce your issue to them. Whether your issue is, swamp water to something civil rights, or you want in daylight savings times, get your issue over. It's very important. But also, I want to reiterate point number 2. You can, I'm a stats person, I'm a facts person. I love those things. Those are what I'm comfortable with. Those are my blanket. But building a personable connection, going back to kind of bridging that little divide there at the beginning, a personal story. I know I've seen when we've had our lobby days, we've had mothers of trans individuals talk about how they worry about their trans son or daughter going off to school and making sure that they're protected. And then they express the issue is about legislation that will protect individuals who are part of the trans community. I think your stories are very impactful. Make them short and simple. The other thing of something talking about how this legislation is going to physically or emotionally impact impact your community locally. Usually this is a piece of legislation, usually it's a piece of, when you do that, it's usually a piece of legislation around commerce or whatnot. So talking about how this is going to impact your community locally. Describe that. The third key is to use key facts to support your case. This is very important. You don't want to get up there and give them a whole dissertation. The best thing that we have been practicing with a lot of the people, a lot of our supporters, or a lot of our advocates, giving them 3 facts that they can use to support their case. So this is spanning off the stats, is the facts, these are the things that can be proven about the legislation. And then one of the last things is making a specific ask. Use this ask is to ask your representative to say no to this legislation or say yes. But also, this ask can be asking them if we can continue having a conversation about this, and maybe setting up a meeting with them in their office or on a Zoom call. I think this is very important. And I think y'all are key to this. Very important is it's important fact. Usually when you have an event, that's great. You can talk about the issue, but having them walk away with something, it holds them accountable and it holds you accountable. When you are talking to your representative and you're offering him the information, you are his guideline, you are his bridge to this issue. And
We lost your sound again, DeMarcus.
The vote's 177 to 164.
what was that?
I'm sorry, the vote is 177 to 164 right now. To get rid of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh God, my God.
Yeah.
Just her committee assignments, not get rid of her, just her committee.
Yep, sorry.
Well, keep us updated. Hopefully
Okay.
Hopefully we'll know something by the end of this call. Okay, and then also the last one is to say thank you. Be polite. It's very important. Again, these are people just like you and I. And showing them the common courtesy they deserve, even though we don't, if we support them or not. I think just another way to build a bridge with them is by being polite.
DeMarcus, I'd love to jump in if I can for just a second.
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. So something that I just want to underline, right, is when we're talking about that specific ask that we're asking of elected officials, right? In my experience, I've been both on the lobbying side and working as chief of staff for state legislators. And a common mistake that we see a lot of people miss is actually making the hard ask, right? Asking them, can I, as your constituent, count on you to vote no on this, right? Or can I count on you to do X? And really kind of asking them, giving them that hard ask. I've seen a lot of folks come in feeling really passionate about an issue and kind of losing that structure that DeMarcus just talked about. But, you know, really kind of walking through it like, this is a local issue, or this is my personal connection to this. And this is like the facts that back me up. And then as your constituent, here is my hard ask of you. And not just, you know, going in a totally different direction, but having that structure and making that hard ask of your elected officials as their constituent can be very effective. And it gives you a good heads up on where they're leaning, right? Most of the time, if you say, yeah, David Dreyer, who's my rep, hey, Representative Dreyer, can I count on you to vote no on this? You know, they'll usually tell you like, yeah, you know, I'm leaning this way, or absolutely, or hard no, or something like that. And so that way you can kind of figure out where they're standing on the process. So really just kind of underlining that structure that he just laid out, and just really making sure that you hit them with the hard ask as their constituent.
Oh.
Thanks, DeMarcus.
No, thank you for adding it in. I think that's very important. Thank you for really hammering that point. Now,
We lost you again, DeMarcus. DeMarcus, we can't hear you.
okay.
Without these graphics though.
Oh, goodness. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, this year is going to be a little bit different. Can be in person, and it's a new digital world. And I know how, disclaimer, I know some of us are very jaded, not jaded.
We can't hear you.
To get closer to your representative, as well as informing your community about things that they should care about. So let's get into that a little bit. These are some digital tools and tactics that you can use. Okay, obviously, social media. It's very important. There's very important things that you can do when you're posting something. You make comments. You obviously do the research on those facts. They're very important. Make sure you're getting it from a great source, and then tagging individuals, influencers, also tagging your representatives, showing them articles. Oftentimes, most of my job all day, to tell y'all the truth, is me sending articles to our House of Representatives at the state level, as well as the national level, for them to make sure that they're getting a lot of these articles, this access to help them see what's important to our community. It's very important. So I also do that through social media as well too. Sending videos. Obviously this year, well, I want to share a story. A group.
We lost your voice again.
Experience, as well as just sharing ideas across the nation about what's the best way, obviously, to tackle lobbying this year. In one group, addressed where they got together and they did a video, and they sent it. They posted. They tagged their representative, and their representative actually replied back to that video and said they will be considering and looking that over. So that's very important. So that's another tactic. Petitions. I know some people think petitions are very outdated, but they can be super impactful. Before COVID times, I remember Georgia Quality did this this postcard campaign, and they had, I think, more than like 5,000 people sign on to these postcards. And it was the dramatic way they had to lug in all of those signature cards to these representatives in their committee meeting. It was a sense of pride. And you know, I would like to say, if you never met one of our representatives, they love theatrics. So they love paper. They love waving paper around and being angry. So for them to stand on the floor in the committee and say, this story, I got this letter from Mary Lou from Macon, Georgia, and she's expressly, and she's one of my congregants, and I want to make sure that her voice is heard up here at the Golden Dawn. I think that's very important to have those types of tools. Also, email. Email them. I think I think a lot of us, Hannah, I don't know how many emails that y'all would get on a regular basis, but I'm sure they were a immaculate amount, but they can be very impactful. If we as individuals, if we get enough, if we send to the offices of our representatives issues, we share these issues and emails, those administrative assistants are marking the issues. So they're kind of like tallying how many times these issues are coming up, and they're going to put it on the desk. They're going to put it at the top of the desk of the representative and saying, this is something that hundreds of people have called in. Well, not hundreds, maybe tens of thousands, tens of people have been emailing or calling us in for. So that's important.
I can absolutely confirm that when elected officials get like one email from one constituent, you know, you read it, or it might be like a legislative staffer who might read it. However, you know, when we're seeing like 10 to 20 emails all on the same thing, that is when it really gets their attention. And then there's this whole other conversation of, hey, representative, we've gotten 10 to 20 emails about this one thing. We really got to look into it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that is just like one of the best ways to start off all of this is, you know, not just emailing yourself, but then having your whole network or all of your neighbors reach out to them as well. That is actually gets their attention very quickly. Okay. Believe me.
Thank you so much. Okay. I've been telling people that for years and no one has believed me. But also Zoom is a very important tool this year. Obviously, Zooms, Google Meets, I'm sure there's like 15 other conferencing SharePod things like we're using right now. But there will be a chance to do one-on-one meetings. You can now, many representatives and senators are offering that. I just set up one for Representative Buddy Carter. I'm going to be meeting with him on February the 19th. I'm going to be doing a Zoom call. I'm not going to do a one-on-one, but I'm going to bring a group of influencers out of the Savannah area, and we're going to have a great conversation with him. And I think that's another way to keep it safe. Obviously, another great thing that I think y'all have really done really well with, Georgia Women, is your forums. I think having your elected officials on and having them connect directly to their constituents, I think that's very, very impactful. I think if they're not doing them, I think we can write emails or we can send letters to encourage them to have forums. I think that's very impactful as well too. So encouraging them is another thing too. Okay, these are other things that are very important, little exercises y'all can do. Obviously, if you do not know who your representative is, this is a great website for you to actually go in. You can put in your zip code and you can find who your representatives are, from the upper house to lower house to your locals. So this is a very important website here. So openstates.org is a very important tool, especially if you have friends and family out there. Share this link with them on social media to tell them.
He'll be back.
It's frustrating.
On social media. I don't, this is not a PSA to stalk your representative, but I would say tag.
We lost you, DeMarcus.
TikTok, and they're having dances and whatnot when they're also writing legislation. So it's really fun. But finding your representative on social media is very important. I know I follow several of our legislative commune here. It's not the right word, commune, but many of our representatives here out of Macon. I follow them on social media because they're showing what legislation they're working on, what they're supporting. It's also just a great way to keep in contact with them as well too. Showing them that you're really kind of leading them through what the people that they're representing what they should be supporting. Obviously, don't do it in an aggressive way. The House, the Georgia House has a Twitter, and it does a great day-to-day breakdown of what legislation is coming up that day, how it's going to be voted on, whatnot. Also, the Senate has a very similar Twitter page, very important. I also follow representatives like Park Cannon and Sam Park. They do great breakdowns after every single legislative session that day. So that's very important. Follow your representatives. I started this year, someone suggested this out of Florida, our partner out of Florida, but to comment on our representatives' accounts. So I went to one of our representatives in Washington, and I said, I'm looking forward to working with you this session. He had a post about like, let's get to work. So I was like, okay, well, I'm looking forward to that. Another way is as a constituent, I'm excited to see what you're going to achieve in a few months. I mean, these are very simple. Or the last one, I can't wait to see some good legislation be passed. If they're actually active on their social media, they will comment on those things. Like I said, we're doing, this is just a little commercial for Georgia Quality right quick. But we are actually doing some lobby days, and we would, if you would like to join us, that'd be great. If you can't, but this is also a great breakdown of how Georgia women can run a lobby day digitally, if y'all would like to. Georgia Quality will host at least three lobby days. We will, in February, obviously we work on HIV and AIDS, so we will have Advocacy Day then. In March, we will be championing our non-discrimination ordinances, statewide law for non-discrimination. And then in April, usually in April, it's already crossover. We know what legislation is active. And usually we get our supporters to jump on and jump in and help us out whatever that legislation. That may be conversion therapy, it may be some trans rights bill, whatever it may be, we will do that. So this is how we're going to be doing it this year, and hopefully y'all can, this is a great framework y'all can use, but on one of our legislation days, we will wake up at 9 o'clock. We will ask our lobbyists, our people who are going to be helping out that day. We're going to ask them to send emails to your two state legislators, your Senate and your House of Representatives, your Senate and your House, but also the assigned legislator targets. These are individuals who are often in those committees that I talked about, or y'all know about. So y'all know about. These are individuals who are pinpointed. They have certain jobs they have to do, and usually Georgia Quality will assign our people to certain targeted individuals.
Okay, DeMarcus, I'm going to stop you right there because we have two more people
Okay, well, yeah, please,
in our
please.
list, and we're trying to be respectful of their time.
God, yes. Let me unshare.
So yes, so we have only one question for you in the chat, and can you please answer as fast as you can? Is there a way to request to speak at hearings now that at a hearing now that they are virtual, or is it?
Yes, ma'am, there is. I think there is a portal. If anything, I'm happy to get back to you about that portal and how to do that. So
Okay, that sounds great. Now we're going to talk about policy push for women and children. And
may I interrupt a minute? I put something on and it didn't show up. DeMarcus, yes. When you send an article to your representative, do you summarize that article and sending it to them, or do you outline bullet points for it, or do you just send the article?
Usually with that article, I do say that I tell them what newspaper it came out, the date, time, whatever, but I also talk about the topic, and I give them a little brief summary, and, and I support it or, whatnot, how I feel.
Okay, thank you.
Just to expound on that, use the sources that the representative would be looking at. Don't use the New York Times if they're reading the Wall Street Journal.
Exactly.
Okay, and the final vote is 230 to 197 for expelling Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committees.
Okay. Allison Glass is a training manager for 9 to 5 Georgia. She is newish Atlantan, transplanted from her hometown of Memphis, where she did statewide advocacy, grassroots organizing, training development, and facilitation for more than 15 years. She was most recently the state director of Sexual Health and Reproductive Freedom Coalition in Tennessee. Allison has also developed popular education and training programs to support the liberatory movement and communities that we need and deserve, with special focus on supporting the continual work of white people, herself included, in undoing habits of white supremacy towards being active and helpful co-conspirators in movement work. She is also a mother of 3 humans and 1 dog, and is partnered with a wonderful fellow lifelong seeker of justice. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. And DeMarcus, thank you so much for all of that amazing information. I was just busy taking notes. So really, really appreciative of that. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this also. So let me share my screen and get my presentation going. All right. So yeah, my name is Allison. I am the training manager with 9 to 5. And I'm also really excited to be supporting the advocacy work and the legislative work that we are doing for this year. So I am pretty newish still to Georgia, to Atlanta. So again, really appreciative of getting all the inside scoop about how the legislature works. Of course, this year is very different, but I'm still learning a lot, which is awesome. So I'm really excited to be doing that work. So, oh, that was not the beginning of my presentation. There it is. So, you know, hopefully you all are familiar with 9 to 5. We are an economic justice organization that focuses on women and our families. And we are a national organization that has several chapters around the country. And we are really excited to also be statewide in Georgia. Because, you know, we know, there's a lot happening around Metro Atlanta, but there's a lot happening everywhere across the state. And just like we saw in our last election, there is so much power throughout the state of Georgia. And it is imperative that we are lifting up the voices, the experience, and the expertise of people across our state. So we are really happy to be in, we have a chapter in Savannah. We have an organizer that's based in Savannah. We have an organizer that's based in Albany. And we are working really hard to establish a chapter in Macon. So some of you might know my coworker, Shandon Neal, that has been doing some work in Macon. We also have been working really closely with Thomas Held, which maybe some of you all know. He really helped to hold the civic engagement program that we did in Macon for these past several elections. It feels like forever. So, that is a bit of who we are. Again, we are, over 40 years old, and really the core of what we do is advocate for better workplace, worker protections. And we've been at the forefront of the fight against harassment and discrimination at work. And maybe if you all saw, there is a new documentary that's out actually about the history of 9 to 5. And it talks a lot about the beginnings of the organization and the chapter in Georgia. It's actually out on PBS, so you can look it up and maybe take a look to learn more. So these are just a few of our buckets of work. So we're all about building power and advancing change through workplace justice, family and community sustainability, and power building, right? Because we know that people harnessing the power that we all have and using that in some directed ways is how we make change. So that's also a big focus of our work. And how do we do that? We do it through community organizing, education and empowerment, and people-centered policy and advocacy. So the community organizing piece, I mentioned our organizer in Albany is doing some incredible organizing around utility and housing, around the issues that we're having. Folks in Albany are having astronomically high light bills, and it is not, it doesn't make sense, right, why this is happening. And they are having a lot of issues with slumlords. And so there is a really large campaign that we're leading there. And people are doing so many things that Marcus just talked about, but on the local level, and including doing some direct actions, right? After they had gone to their city commission, did all of the things that we're supposed to do, and the body wasn't listening, right? And so then it's well, then we have to take it to the next step. And they started having some protests outside of the utility company's office. And they started getting some attention, and now they have a seat at the table. So that's a part of our, organizing strategy as well. We are also, I mentioned our organizer in Savannah. She is launching a childcare campaign. We know that affordable and accessible childcare has been an issue for a long time in our country, but COVID, just like it has amplified all of our issues times 1,000, the issue around childcare is probably times 1,000,000. I mean, it is an absolute crisis. There is no federal support for childcare in our country. And the childcare providers are just suffering immensely. Parents are suffering immensely. And there is a lot of support that's really needed around that. So that's an upcoming campaign we have going on. And then we do, education and empowerment. Like was mentioned, I am a training manager. I have written lots and lots of trainings and workshops for 9 to 5 to help folks learn skills around community organizing, around, just like DeMarcus did, around how to effectively lobby and talk to your elected officials. We also have done things like helping people to learn the skills of salary negotiation, right? Because equal pay is also one of our really big issues that 9 to 5 has been working on for a long time. And so again, it's just really wanting to give people the skills to harness that power that they have to be able to make change. We teach people, DeMarcus also talked about story collection. And a lot of people don't realize, right, that the experiences that they have had in their lives are, these like choice points. And looking at those moments as times where, an important decision was made, and then that led you to, speaking out about poverty wages, right? Because you've had a hard time, in your not having access to good paying jobs. Thinking about those personal things that people have experienced and helping people to understand that, first of all, they are not alone. Secondly, that there is like a policy connection to it, right? It is not all about us pulling up our bootstraps as individuals. It is about figuring out these issues as a community, as a state, and that there are those structural level changes that are really needed so that those change can happen in a lasting way that will really lift up our communities in the ways that we need. So we try to help people to understand that, right? And that these experiences that they're facing in their lives, that there is actually a policy connection to it, and that their story is so important, and that we really want, and that they really need to be heard. We also do a lot of this work through a program, our Community Justice Fellowship program, where it's like a paid fellowship for folks to come on board and learn about these issues, learn about these skills, and then really become advocates with 9 to 5 in a deeper way. And then thirdly, what I'm here to talk about tonight really is the policy work that we do. 9 to 5 has absolutely been doing national and state level policy work for a very long time. And we're really excited to be kind of in a new phase of the work that we're doing. We have a new amazing state director in Georgia. Her name is Micah Whitfield. 9 to 5 also has a new executive director. We're being led by a woman of color for the first time in the organization's history. Her name is Leland Chansey. And she is really helping the organization to center in racial gender justice and having some renewed focus and understanding of economic justice in a deeper way that really centers people who are most impacted. And so that is also how we view our policy and advocacy work, right? Is making sure that it is people-centered, that we really are listening to our members, listening to our communities, and hearing the issues that are impacting them in their everyday lives, and taking, again, that structural change to make lasting impact on those issues. Relatedly, we also run, as I mentioned, really robust civic engagement programs, and have been doing a lot of that work, which has been really fun lately. So now just to get into some of our legislative priorities for 2021. And I am going to switch my share real quick to bring up. Let's see what I'm looking for here. It's like DeMarcus said, like, we're gonna get this soon. My screen go. Okay, we'll do this a different way. Here we go. That's what I'm looking for. So this is kind of a top line, like a kind of broad picture of our legislative priorities for this year. First up is supporting access to paid medical and family leave to support workers' abilities to take care of themselves and their families. We firmly believe that no one should have to make a choice, and far too many people do, right, of having to either choose between taking care of themselves and their families and keeping their jobs, because we do not have a paid leave program in our country. We are one of the only countries in the world, like literally it is the United States and maybe 2 other countries, and that do not have any form of paid leave. That is changing slowly. Some federal employees just recently gained a bit of paid leave, but we are like inching towards this incredibly important support that all families really need and deserve. So while there is some exciting movement at the federal level, in fact, our new Georgia senators are really spearheading some national legislation. The Paycheck Fairness Act is the federal bill, and they have just come out saying that they are going to champion this bill, which is amazing news. But we also need that here in Georgia. Governor Kemp actually, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm going to dig into some of the specific bills in just a minute, so I'm going to keep it kind of high level for now. The next thing that we really want, again, pay equity, equal pay is something that 9 to 5 has been working towards since our inception. We know that, to this, women are earning an average of 70 cents on the dollar compared to white men. That disparity gets even more drastic when you break that down, when you look at women of color specifically, and we've got to do better on these issues. So that is absolutely another issue that we are always looking at. Legislation that protects all working people from discrimination and harassment is also a cornerstone of our work. Georgia is one of just 3 states that doesn't have a civil rights law to protect individuals from discrimination in housing, public accommodations, and employment. That is a disgrace. We've got to change that, right? I came to Georgia and I was like, really? We don't even have a civil rights law? But no, we don't. So something we got to work on. And I know that Georgia Equality is 100%, and DeMarcus has been doing such amazing work on the local level, which is where it has to start, right? And then as we build power in the Golden Dome, we're going to change that together for sure. Next, I already mentioned childcare, but that is definitely another cornerstone issue for us. Incredibly, incredibly important and impacting women of color in a really tremendous way. So really something that we have got to figure out as communities. How are we going to support people having affordable and high quality childcare for our families? I mentioned utilities justice earlier. That was the high utility bills down in Albany, but we know that this is something that is happening across the state, and housing injustice as well, right? Again, COVID showed us all of the holes that have already been, but knowing that people were getting evicted during COVID, and that we had elected officials who were allowing that to happen, right? Allowing Georgia Power to, and giving them permission to evict people during the COVID crisis is just so unjust. So that's something that we absolutely are working towards fixing. Supporting pregnant and postpartum employees and providing appropriate workplace accommodations is something that's incredibly important, and that we are working on this year as well in partnership with some amazing other organizations. This would be like someone who is breastfeeding, having a law, and that was actually just passed, right, this past summer in Georgia, that employers actually have to give people who are breastfeeding time to go and pump if they are at work. So this law, what we're working towards, would take that a little bit farther, so that if people need to sit down at work, they're allowed to do that. If they're pregnant, being able to keep a water bottle with them. I mean, things that you would think would be very simple, but that a lot of workers really struggle with and can really impact their health. So that's another issue we're working towards. And then we are partnering with many organizations led by GBPI, the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, on supporting a people-powered prosperity initiative. It's a very broad policy initiative just to support families and healthy communities and to build a strong workforce. That is where hopefully everyone has heard about trying to pass a state level earned income tax credit. Again, Georgia is one of the few states that doesn't have, we all have the federal earned income tax credit. Lots of states also have a state level one. We should have one too. It would raise more than $500 million in annual revenues for Georgia families that would really impact all of these other issues. So that's some of the kind of high level work that we are looking at for this year. Let me get back to my other presentation and I will dig in a little bit more into some specifics. So around workplace harassment, again, as I said, Georgia, because we don't have that state level law, we actually don't have any state level protections for private employees. So if someone is harassed or discriminated against at work, people in Georgia have to use our federal protections, right? But there are a lot of loopholes in that. It's very challenging to use the federal protections. There's just all kinds of issues with it. We need a state level law for that. So we are partnering with Representative Wynn and the National Women's Law Center to introduce some model legislation here in Georgia. Representative Wynn introduced a similar bill last year during the legislature, and we're building on that and really happy that she is excited that we have kind of expanded what she did last year to provide more protections to create, definitions around harassment that is more expansive and allows for people, yes, it's absolutely about sexual harassment that happens at work, but understanding that people get discriminated against based on their race, their religion, their age, all of those things, right, need to be a part of the protections that we pass in Georgia. Another great thing about the bill is that the federal law only applies to employers of 15 or more employees. So this would actually just be one or more. And then the other great thing about it is that we actually don't use the definition employee. We're using I'm missing the word right now, but a word that would actually include contract workers and domestic workers and farm workers and people who are on a type of contract, right, who are far too often left out of the protections that exist. And that is true, they're left out of the federal law as well. So that's one specific bill that we are working on. We are finalizing the language around it. We are in the midst of getting additional co-sponsors to be a part of the legislation. So I don't have a bill number for you yet, but it will be coming very soon. There we go. Our second kind of focus for this session is about paid leave. Again, we are working with a partner, a wonderful organization called A Better Balance that focuses on very similar issues as 9 to 5. And they have been doing a lot of work around creating a family and medical leave insurance program for employees. And they have been passing this legislation all across the South, which is really exciting. In fact, we are working with Representative Schofield on this bill, and we were able to give her some legislation that is moving in Tennessee. And as we know, being in the South, it's really important for us to be able to say, like, no, this is actually working in other Southern places, and we need to, get on board. So what this bill does is, like I said, it creates a paid family and medical leave insurance program to provide 12 weeks of paid leave for all employees in the state. So it's not just state employees, it's every employee in the state. And they could use that for birth, adoption, or foster care, or caring for a seriously ill loved one, or dealing with your own serious illness, or supporting a family member. And it also covers, military deployment of a family member. It's important that we are defining family as having a really inclusive family definition that covers extended family and close loved ones, regardless of legal or biological connection. So making sure that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are a part of being able to use these types of protections. So we're really excited again to just introduce this model legislation. We know the power structure that is inside the Georgia Capitol. And so it is, a decision that advocates make, right? Like, are we going to put forth something that has a bit of a chance to move, or are we going to put forth like what people actually really deserve, and help people to understand, like, hear these messages, and hear the, having people, just like DeMarcus said, right, to call in and say, no, like, actually what we need is these 12 weeks of paid leave. So we know that this is long haul work, but we want to get it moving and get folks started thinking about, actually, this is what Georgians need and deserve. There are two other related bills that have already been filed for this year. The first one is a bill that Representative Gaines, who is out of Athens, introduced. And it is already moving. Representative Gaines is a Republican, and it is a 3-week paid leave bill for state employees only. So it is a baby step in the right direction. And we are glad that it is out there, and it is absolutely not enough. But he introduced this bill last year, and it really actually went very far, and probably honestly would have passed if it hadn't been for COVID. And so he's doing it again. Like I said, we are obviously supportive and recognize that it is a baby step. And then there's another bill that has been that is out that Senator Butler is sponsoring, and it is the Georgia Family Medical Leave Act. Again, it is 12 weeks. It does provide, it is creating that paid leave insurance program. And we're really excited to talk with Senator Butler more to see if she is willing to make some changes so that it is more aligned with kind of the national standard of what a program can be. But again, just that, paid leave has been, it really has elevated on the national stage. We've been hearing a lot about it, and there is a lot of, forward movement around it, which is beyond time. So we're glad about that. And then lastly, another bill is around pay equity. And it is HB 55 that Representative Bazemore has introduced. And it is basically a salary history ban. Because what we know about that, the disparity in pay is that, if someone has been paid a lesser wage in previous jobs, then applying for their new job and that employer saying, so what did you make in your old job, does absolutely nothing but recreate the cycle of the pay gap, right? And so lots of other places have passed salary history bans. And there is data showing that it absolutely does help in closing that gap. So this is a great bill. We're excited to support it and excited to work with Representative Bazemore on it. And I think that, yeah, that is what I wanted really to share with you all. We would love for you all to get engaged with our organization. We are a membership organization and would absolutely love to have you join us. Those are all of our social media channels where you can connect, like DeMarcus was saying. And then I just want to share with you all one last invitation, which we have, I'll scoot over bar. There we go. We have been doing virtual chapter meetings this year, obviously. So we have our first one of the year coming up on February 18th. And we would love to have you join us. We're going to talk some about what all is in store for 9 to 5 this year. And then we're going to talk some more about what is happening during the legislative session this year and how we need folks to get involved. And I will paste that into the chat. So we would love for you all to get registered and join us for that and hear from some of our other amazing organizers who are doing this work with 9 to 5 Georgia. Thank you all so much.
Allison, could you also add the name of the documentary to the chat? Because I didn't catch it.
Absolutely. I will grab the link real quick.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it. I didn't see any questions in the chat other than the asking you to tell the name of the
Documentary.
That's even better. Put the link in there.
Yeah.
Next will be Hannah Perkins. And Hannah is the political director of the AFL-CIO. And her responsibilities have included running the labor campaign for the runoff election for Senators Ossoff and Warnock. And before that, she was a lobbyist. Before accepting that position, she was chief of staff for Representative B. Nguyen, who is sponsoring one of the bills, that 9 to 5 that we were talking about that Allison mentioned, and David Dreyer. And she is currently a lobbyist for the AFL-CIO during the Georgia legislative session. She's single and she's a dog mom. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So excited to talk with all of y'all today. Like Lynn said, I'm the political director of the Georgia AFL-CIO, which is the largest labor union in the great state of Georgia. We, under our affiliation, have everyone from electricians to stagehands and grocery store workers. And so we have a huge membership all across the state. And so I will serve them as their lobbyist down at the state capitol. And this is about, I think, year 5 of me working down there. As Lynn said previously, I was chief of staff for Representative B. Nguyen and worked additionally for Representative Dreyer as well. So I'm excited to kind of talk about, what I've seen on the lobbying side and also what I've seen as effective working in state legislative offices. And so in my role and experience, as a lobbyist, I deal a lot with going to elected officials and saying, we need you to support this, or please, God, don't vote for that. And so kind of having those conversations. And I want to really build on some of those amazing points Marcus made earlier this evening, right? I think one of the greatest strengths that y'all have is being able to mobilize your friends, your community, your network to really reach out on these different issues. And so making sure that, we're sending all of the emails, calling them up, and really making those hard asks. And again, underlining kind of that structure that he lined out earlier today, kind of making it personal, making the hard ask, giving them the facts, not writing them an entire essay. And then also, you know, really working to have that conversation, whether it's via Zoom or in some other fashion, right? And kind of building that relationship, you know, as we go, right? Your representatives are your representatives and will be your representatives next session as well. And so as you're moving throughout the process, you know, really building those relationships with folks. So as you go back time and time again, they know you, they're going to listen and actually hear what you have to say. And so, you know, some of the best ways I think to do that are to ask for like an introductory meeting, or hi, I'd like to have like a quick 15-minute meeting to introduce myself and talk about our priorities as Georgia women. And then again, really mobilizing your community to reach out to your elected officials. And I also kind of want to build on a few things, right? Because, you know, legislation doesn't go from I introduced this to a House floor vote. And so something that's really effective is if you are really passionate about, let's say, the sexual harassment bill, which Allison is a phenomenal bill, great work on that. But let's say we're lobbying on this issue, right? You know, the great first step is to go to your state representative and your state senator saying, yep, this is great. This is why we need this, having the personal story, making the hard ask, right? But then that piece of legislation will go to a committee. You can even go as far as saying, all right, which elected officials are on this committee? And why don't we all go have conversations with them? Why don't we mobilize all of our friends to, you know, reach out to these committee members? Because those are the people who are going to vote on it first, right? And then once it gets out of committee, then going to the rules committee and saying, all right, now we're going to target the people on this committee before it goes to a House floor vote. And so lobbying in a way that kind of follows the legislation along through the process can also be really effective, right? And understanding that, you know, if we're lobbying on House bill, like if it was Representative Wynn's sexual harassment bill, first starting with your representatives and moving through the process. And then as it flips sides, moving through the your senators, right? Whether it's your state senator or your whoever your friend's state senator or the senators on this committee. And so kind of moving through it as the legislative process goes. And so, you know, I do want to talk a little bit about what it looks like now, since we're in pandemic times and not the before times, right? A lot of this looks really different, right? They're not letting everyone and their mother just go into the state capitol to lobby at the moment. So really taking a step back and saying, all right, you know, can we set up a Zoom meeting? Can we do a Google Meet? Let's make sure we're sending all of the emails. And like we talked about earlier, I can confirm that they read those emails, and especially when we get emailed like frequently like that, that very much catches folks' eye. And that's even a tactic that we use as labor unions, where we will go to all of our members and say, this is a big issue, this is super important. And then we'll do a letter writing campaign to elected officials via email. And even on the lobbying side, I know this is effective because I have been in conversations with state representatives before that have said, like, your members are really spamming me about this issue. And it's like, well, good, that's what we want. Right? Like, and so leaning into those, I think, are the best way to really kind of mobilize with an issue. And then I also want to talk a little bit about what we can expect coming up, because this legislative session is going to be a little haywire. We can expect lots of attacks on our voting and our democracy here in Georgia, right? We already know that they're going to try to walk back all of those mail-in ballot laws that we have. They're going to try to walk back all of the drop boxes that we have, even down to the dates of which you can request an absentee ballot. I believe on the House side, we've already seen about 10 voter suppression bills. And on the Senate side, we've also seen another 10 drop today that are voter suppression, right? And so we can't expect a lot of that. And so I think that is a great mobilizing issue, because that affects everyone. That affects all of us. That is our democracy that's on the line. And we know that this is all going to take effect well before the next election, 2022, right? So we can expect a lot of that. I think that is going to be one of the hottest topics this legislative session, right? Yeah, this is the puppy. Can you say hi? Okay. So we can expect a lot of attacks on our democracy, right? And so I think that's going to be a big mobilizing thing. And then as the labor unions, what we're really trying to work on is a lot of the stuff around COVID-19, right? And so really kind of mobilizing and preventing bad legislation that could hurt workers. For example, there is a current bill that actually provides corporations like a get out of jail free pass, even if their workers get sick on the job, even if this, that, or the other happens. Like, you know, kind of giving them a free pass and letting them lower the accountability, right? So putting an end to that. We like to call it corporate immunity. And then also trying to bulk up worker protections, right? There are actually like all the emergency orders that Governor Kemp has put in place are suggestions. They're not actually like mandatory. And so as labor, we have seen intimately how this actually hurts people on the job, right? Employers not cleaning up after an outbreak, not having the proper PPE. And so we are working and drafting some very exciting worker protection legislation. And so kind of moving through on both angles. And that's something else that I think is super effective when you're trying to like move something through the General Assembly, is not just saying, no, this is bad, but saying, no, this is bad, and here is the solution, right? And I think that's also helpful when we're trying to engage with different communities, because we're saying, oh, this is bad, but let's do this instead, right? And so that's just kind of my quick little blip. And I saw the question in the chat, what is the likelihood that we could schedule a Zoom meeting, even for just 15 minutes with one of your legislators? It does seem different from chatting with people on the ropes. It absolutely does seem very different, right? Because normally when we're going to the rope line, you can kind of flag someone down, right? And have a whole conversation with them. But I will say over the last few weeks, I have seen them actually transition kind of well to the whole virtual process. Like I've had several meetings today via Zoom. I've seen a lot of the caucus meeting via Zoom. So I think they are more amenable to meeting in that type of way. What I don't want to say is absolutely, I'm sure all state reps in the state of Georgia are about to meet on Zoom, right? Like we know this varies wildly based on who your representative is and also what issue you're advocating for. But the rule of thumb that I always go for is ask. The worst they could do is say no, right? It never hurts to reach out and say, hi, I'm your constituent, right? And I'd like to set up just a quick meeting, 10, 15 minutes online virtually with you. That is always the best place to start, right? And then, you know what, let's say they didn't, you can always ask your neighbor, ask your friends, you know, you can all group ask them, right? The worst they could do is say no. And honestly, if they don't meet with you, they don't want to meet with you, that's what the election ballot box is for, right? And so really kind of saying, all right, we're going to take a step back. We're going to ask them for the meeting. And if they say no, we're going to email them and we're going to phone call them. And we're going to move through each and every tool in our toolbox to make sure that our voices are actually heard. So I would suggest reaching out. Again, I can't speak for the whole General Assembly because we all know that depending on who they are, that could get a little difficult, but always ask. And I'd love to hear if y'all have any other questions for me. I know I can kind of hit on a few angles, whether it is as a legislative staffer or from a lobbying perspective. I do want to say that I'm so excited to be talking with all of y'all today, seeing all y'all women step up and say like, no, I want my voice heard in Georgia politics. That is amazing. And we need much more than that. And so I'm happy to help and happy to answer any questions that y'all have. And honestly, even just have a conversation. Yeah, I see a hand up. Oh, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
I mashed the button. Okay. When DeMarcus was talking as well, you were talking about the hard ask, and I'm curious. Again, I can see that when you're speaking to somebody face to face and you're asking them, can we count on you? When you're emailing them, do you ask and then do you actually expect a reply?
Yes. So I mean, again, always ask, right? That is always a good first step. And even on the campaign side, I still think that's a great way to frame that, right? Can I count on you as my elected official to do this, right? And of course, there's a chance that they're not going to respond, but there's also a chance that they would respond, or one of their legislative staffers would respond, right? And then you can really have a conversation. And, you know, I know sometimes it might feel annoying that, oh, I just got whoever's legislative staffer, but I think that's a great first step, right? Because first, the legislative staffer has more time to actually talk with you and flesh out the issue, and they can take it to their representative or senator. And so, you know, actually, I always make the hard ask, right? Because the alternative is this, where you talk or you write for however many paragraphs or talk for however many minutes, and when you don't hit them with an ask, it doesn't really give them an action item, right? And so when we kind of frame it in that way of, I'm voting for you, I vote for you, I am your constituent, can I count on you to do this, right?
Got it.
Each time.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I had a question. You were talking about some of the COVID-based legislation, but you have no bill numbers yet. You're still
So
working
I
on that.
absolutely have a bill number for the bad bill that we do not like. That would be House Bill 12, and I can drop this in the chat. And when you look at it, it's kind of funky, right? So I'm happy to talk more in depth on this one. So last year, when the General Assembly reconvened around midsummer, they were afraid that businesses would see an avalanche of lawsuits claiming that they got sick on the job, and so therefore that they are like responsible, and that the companies and businesses would all get sued. We know for a fact that that is factually incorrect. We've even gone as far as researching all of the court cases that have been filed related to COVID immunity or COVID-19 since this all happened. And almost each time, it is like less than 5% are based on employers. And even in those instances, it's usually related around healthcare, right? And so what they're really doing in this legislation is lowering the bar for accountability with these corporations and employers, right? Because when we say, oh, you don't have to worry about any like judicial or accountability check by a lawsuit or by however, we know that corporations and businesses, especially big businesses, are going to cut the corners, and they're still going to, you know, lower the safety precautions that they're going to take, right? Because they're more focused on making a profit than keeping their workplace safe. And so when we remove that accountability check, it kind of gives them a go-to for how they can treat workers. And we have heard time and time again throughout this pandemic of people getting sick on the job, right? And we all know people who've gotten sick, and we all know how this happens, right? And, you know, I've heard disturbing stories about how employers are actually treating their workers around this pandemic. And when we lose that accountability check, it just lets them fly off, right? And so this year, they decided to extend that, because originally, back when we were all hopeful and excited about this ending sooner, they thought that this would all be over by now. And it's not. And so they want to extend this really harmful legislation to go for another year, right? And kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, right, is we don't want to just say no, just no. We want to say no, and here's the solution, right? And so we are working on a very comprehensive worker liability, civil rights-esque, like workers' bill of rights looking legislation that will be hitting soon. When I have a bill number, I'm happy to circle back around with y'all on that. But it does go much more in depth, you know, even down to defining hand sanitizer, which you wouldn't think you'd need to define, but trust me, like, you know, we need that actually in code to make sure that we're protecting grocery store workers, to make sure we're protecting the people who deliver packages, protecting everyone who is out there sacrificing, right? And I feel like in Georgia, we run up on this very frequently, where we hear Governor Kemp and everyone out of the party say, oh, Georgia is the best state for businesses, but it's not the best state for workers, right? And so while we are fighting this, again, corporate immunity legislation, we want to make sure that we're actually trying to bulk up worker protections as we're doing this, right? And again, I can drop the legislation here. It'd be 112 by Trey Kelly. And I can circle back with y'all when we have legislation on actual worker protections, which are much needed in this state, for sure.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Do you,
what's up, Cindy?
hi, do you expect many of these or most of these voters limiting or suppression bills to pass? And if they do you think that Governor Kemp will actually sign? And what can we do?
Absolutely. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. Yes, I think
Okay.
Governor Kemp would absolutely sign. I think there is no question there. How the likelihood of them passing, I think really is about to depend on the work that coalitions are about to do, right? And when it comes to voting rights, we really do have a very strong coalition on this issue. Everyone from Stacey Abrams' brainchild Fair Fight and New Georgia Project to Labor to 9 to 5 and Georgia Equality, right? We are all really united when it comes to protecting our democracy. And so I think a lot of what is going to happen is we're going to start seeing all of these organizations come together and say, nope, bad idea, right? And going about it in a few different ways, because again, we all have different relationships, right? And so there are going to be some elected officials that we can go to and some elected officials that others can go to. And so the likelihood of it passing, you know, I will be honest, I don't think it looks great. However, there are so many people who are going to be working nonstop to prevent this and throw up every possible barrier between it passing and where we are now. And what y'all can do, I think what y'all can do is exactly what we've been talking about for the last 2 hours, right? Is writing your state representative and writing your state senator, having the meetings, right? A lot of this legislation is still very early in the process, right? When I was talking about the 10 bills in the state Senate, that just dropped today, right? And so each of these bills has to be read out loud twice. They each have to go through a committee, and then they each have to go through Rules Committee, right? And then they get to the House floor, and then they get to the Senate floor. And even once it's on the House floor and the Senate floor, and let's say it passes in one chamber, it still has to go through the whole process all over again on the other side, right? And so what we can do is really start reaching out to your representatives, reaching out to the people on those committees and having those conversations and letting them know that Georgia voters will not stand for this, right? This is not tolerable and this is unacceptable. And I don't know if Allison or DeMarcus want to chime in here, because this is something that, you know, really affects all of us. And I feel like, you know, as progressive organizations and honestly, just as Georgians, right, this is something that we can all touch on and talk about actively.
Yeah, absolutely with you, Hannah. 9 to 5 will be making a lot of noise, as will many, many other organizations against these voter suppression bills. And we know that it is in direct retaliation from the amazing progress that we just did. And, you know, we're not going to stand for it. So we will definitely, you know, need each and every one of us in that fight. And we will absolutely be there alongside all of you.
I mean, I concur with all of that, but a great way how we all can make sure we stay on the same page, if we're following each other's social medias, so that if you're on Facebook or Instagram, whatnot, all of our organizations have all these social medias. If you're a little skeptical about social media, we also have email lists. And that's a great way how to see upcoming actions. I know Georgia Equality, we have weekly phone banks you all can join to help out, get other people involved. And that's something that you can join.
I just want to throw out to Allison and Hannah. I know DeMarcus is well aware of this, as are the rest of you on this chat. But Hannah and Allison, if you're not aware, Lynn over there in the corner writes a weekly advocacy list of actions that is absolutely amazing. And if you've not signed up for Lynn's list, I implore you to do that. Yes, right. She deserves.
Yay, Lynn.
Yes, she does. So in all seriousness, check out Lynn's list. That's what we for 4 years, every week, we have been putting out a list for all of our members and anybody else who wants to sign up for, you know, to get these emails, to know what they can be doing. And we give people scripts, phone numbers, email addresses, who to contact, how to contact them, and what to say.
Well, and for those who are on the list right now, you noticed last week's or this week's was unbelievably cumbersome, so unbelievably long. because there's so many bills that are bad. A few good ones, but yes. And it's not going to get any better. I apologize because I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 voter suppression bills that dropped this week. That's just the Senate. So I haven't seen the House ones yet, but those are the sets. And it's the absentee ballot application ID, drop boxes, voter automatic voter registration ending. Each one of these is a separate bill. Instead of doing a whole big bill, they're doing them all separately to exhaust us, I believe, because we have to address each one of those bills. So I am imploring people to bear with us until the legislative session is over, and we'll get through this, but we definitely do not want these voter suppression bills to get passed. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Well, thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you to everyone who attended. We have some really great information, and things are different because of COVID. So it's important to get the new information out. I personally was hoping that after the 2020 election, we as an organization could be winding down our advocacy. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And as President Biden said in his inaugural address, democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And I don't think I realized how fragile it really was. And our work isn't done if we want to protect our democracy. And for those of you who have been on Lynn's list for a while, I used to always end, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And that's still true. We still have a long way to go before we hit the finish line. So thank you everybody for coming and listening, and we appreciate you, and hope to see you all soon.
Take care.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Good night.
Good night.